that's the nature of politics in general. When you get political, you're going to catch the disease that comes with it, which is increased government growth and more control over people's lives. And that's why it's like a massive Frankensteinian experiment that will go completely wild when left unchecked.
The Culinary Libertarian Podcast, episode 26.
Welcome to the Culinary Libertarian Podcast, where the philosophy is free, but the food is on you.
Hello folks, Dan Reed here, the Culinary Libertarian. Happy to have you back. Happy to be here. Few notes first. Head on over to my podcasts page, culinarylibertarian.com/podcasts, and you can click on my Facebook icon and join my Eating Liberty group, or follow me on Twitter or Instagram. Also on the podcasts page, you'll find my Patreon button. I would appreciate any support you can give. Please do rate the show and leave a positive review on your favorite podcatcher. Ratings and reviews move the show up in the ranks and gets more people listening. And the more people listening are the more people who get cooking. And lastly, do please share the show on social media. The fight for 15 or some other arbitrary number as the minimum wage is a flaw in economic thinking. Wage is the price for labor. Everybody wants more money, but so few people really seem to understand what money is, or what prices are, or what is the business cycle. Economist Jeff Herberner's class, Austrian Economics Step by Step, at Liberty Classroom, can help you bite back against your incomplete education from the state. Find his class and over 20 more with my affiliate link to the Tom Woods Liberty Classroom, culinarylibertarian.com/biteback. Bite back against the failed education from the state. When you subscribe through the Bite Back link, head over to the courses page and find the Austrian Economics class, culinarylibertarian.com/biteback. My guest today is Jose Niño, a libertarian freelance writer based in Fort Collins, Colorado, and currently writing for Mises.org and the Advocates for Self-Government. We're speaking today about Jose's 2018 article published in Mises.org entitled, "Get Ready for the War on Meat." He has since written a follow-up article, "The Green New Deal Continues the War on Meat," also for Mises.org. Both articles will be linked on today's show notes page, culinarylibertarian.com/26. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you for having me on, Dan.
It's my pleasure. So before we get going, we're going to talk about your article, "Get Ready for the War on Meat," that was published on Mises.org. Give us a little bit of background about who Jose is and what you write about.
Well, I am very libertarian. I got into this movement through Ron Paul. I was born in Venezuela, but came to the States when I was relatively young, in the late 90s, right before when the country went to crap. And since I've been involved in the liberty movement, I've gotten very involved with ideas and also certain political groups. My journey has brought me from being kind of the typical libertarian social media troll to somewhat of a political operative and investigative journalist on certain matters concerning economics, Second Amendment topics, and even occasional foreign policy articles. I've written all over the spectrum from a libertarian perspective. And yeah, the War on Meat was just a piece I wrote just detailing how certain institutions, especially governing institutions on an international scale, want to tax meat and want to regulate it out of existence, just like pretty much every other human activity that we've seen since the progressive state came into being about a century ago.
And they don't seem to be slowing down even one little teeny tiny bit. You write a little bit in there, you talk about vegans, and I personally don't have a problem with a vegan diet because I think lentil dishes are just fine. My problem with vegans is the people and their politicization tough to say, and frankly, religiosity for their, well, they call it a diet. It seems like a way of life. What has your experience been in those terms with dealing with the vegan?
I've actually had very good experiences with vegans because most of the vegans I have met are actually quite non-political. They just, and like you said, they engage in a lifestyle and they tend to keep to themselves. The problem is whenever you have like the more political vegans that obviously use the state to try to impose their will on others, that's when it's problematic. I have no problem with the vegan diet. It's a diet and lifestyle choice. And the most effective diet is the one that you can stick to, whether it's carnivore, vegan, low carb, whatever. I think the real discussion in this debate on the war on meat is, should the state be involved in the regulation of meat or any food for that matter? And I say no. But unfortunately, our political culture in the past century has instinctively turned to the state to solve every so-called problem. And more often than not, they create more problems because that's how government intervention works. And the law of unintended consequences the law of unintended consequences is always going to shine whenever we have government intervention. Unfortunately, many people don't understand that. And I think in these debates about like diets and whatnot, and public policy is really a debate of whether the state should be in our kitchens and not. And as I said, we need a complete separation of food and state if we want to have both a healthy dieting experience and also a healthy civic society experience as well.
You wrote that one of the groups pushing for a vegan diet, and I think there's a distinction to be made here that pushing for a not meat diet isn't the same as pushing for a vegan diet, but that may be a distinction without a difference. One of these groups, the Fair Animal Investment Risk and Return Company, they are no strangers to activism, and they are no fly-by-night company. Add to them the very visible Cory Booker and his position on eliminating meat, and we end up with a society, or at least a culture, who lives by sight bites and reading headlines to think that there's some real important, big pressing issue here. And you mentioned a minute ago, I think it's right, the unintended consequences. So you did mention a little bit about FAIR. Tell me about FAIR. They seem they seem to be less. Well, no, that's not true. They seem to be much more than they appear to be. Their webpage, it reads kind of nicely, but I suspect something else is up.
Well, these groups, they've gained a lot of prominence the past few years because of it's become culturally in vogue to demonize meat. So it's going to naturally attract a lot of moneyed interest. And they like preside over actually like $4 trillion in assets. So as you said, they're not a lightweight group. A lot of the food industry is massive. So like even if like you like quote unquote eliminate meat, there's a ton of other industries like big sugar, big grains that are subsidized to the tune of billions that will likely hop on board this campaign. Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily exclusively vegans hopping on board in the strictest sense. There's some, obviously, that are very political, but it's a coalition of big food and their subsidiaries like sugar, grains, and busybody bureaucrats that just love controlling everything. Heck, they control sugar as well. They like to put regulations on sugar. And it creates an unholy alliance with them, animal rights activists that also turn to politics for just more government control. And a lot of these groups, the irony is they have non-political educational sects that will offer some valid points, and their ideas should always be debated. But it's unfortunate that a lot of governing institutions co-opt these movements and in turn create unholy alliances like these to just control our lives.
Well, yeah, I live in Oregon. There's a lot of that seeming to go on in the state of Oregon. So I think we're becoming all a little too familiar with that idea. One of the things FAIR seems to be in favor of is abandoning factory farming, but they don't really go to the point of saying they want to abandon farming entirely. So I'm going to give them at least some benefit of the doubt and say, let's go towards smaller farming, which seems to be a tie-in, at least to the Green New Deal, on the point of farming, and she goes into soil health and soil conditions. I think there's a lot of political good intention in the Green New Deal, but people who look at it say this is just craziness. Is it a stretch to say that FAIR isn't really interested even in small farming?
I would say that just for a start, the monitoring of factory farms, I think, is valid. At least like from a private initiative standpoint. I mean, that there's legitimate concerns about factory farming. Now, I don't think it should require that the state get completely involved in that, but you have seen like some free market responses with the development of like like a lot of the grass-fed beef movement. They've built a solid watchdog infrastructure for that. I don't know what FAIR's endgame is, but they may have very good intentions, but they might not realize the politicians that they will very likely ally with might have a completely different agenda, and that's what happens when you get political. When you start getting in bed with the government, you're going to deal with people that are very, very sociopathic and very interested in control at the end of the day, that they will go above and beyond whatever interest group they partnered with and use it to advance their own agendas. And sometimes these interest groups don't realize they opened up a Pandora's box that they never intended to do so in the first place. But that's the nature of politics in general. When you get political, you're going to catch the disease that comes with it, which is increased government growth and more control over people's lives. And that's why it's like a massive Frankensteinian experiment that will go completely wild when left unchecked.
Jose, let's take a minute out for a word from my affiliate, D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan is, simply put, dedicated to selling simply the best foie gras, truffles, meat, game, and mushrooms to American gastronomes, whether they are at home or at the restaurant. One product I especially like to cook with is the rendered duck fat. It is similar to bacon fat, but has a smoother flavor and adds a wonderful richness to sautés or soups, or even as an ingredient in warm salad dressing. And yes, you can make duck confit. Click over to culinarylibertarian.com/D'Artagnan to see the wide variety of items for your pantry and for your summer grill. It's coming. culinarylibertarian.com/DARTAGNAN, or visit the link at the show notes page, culinarylibertarian.com/26. Now, let's get back to the interview. So you mentioned a Pandora's box, which I think is a really good illusion. Just for a second, let's look inside this box. If factory farming is eliminated, well, then along with the factory farming is all the jobs down the line that are going to go away along with that. So now we have a fight for 15, except you want to do away with factory farming, so there isn't a McDonald's to hire the kid to say, do you want fries with that, because you've eliminated meat. Is that just insanity? Am I taking this to too much of an extreme, or is there some validity to a extreme overcorrection when politicians get involved in things they really shouldn't get involved in?
That's not extreme at all. Because if you were to like say eliminate factory farming, that's going to destroy tons of jobs and capital ultimately that would be otherwise used for productive endeavors such as McDonald's and even mom and pop restaurants too. because I think this could effectively impact a massive sector of the economy and a lot of regulations. As I mentioned before, with the law of unintended consequences, a lot of regulations sometimes have an impact beyond what the politicians envisioned. So it's not a stretch to say this would have like second or third order effects in a lot of sectors of the U.S. economy.
Well, it's funny because Milton Friedman had made a comment in some interview some while ago, mentioning that there ought to be some phrase that is representative of the opposite of the invisible hand, and he came up with the invisible foot of government, which seems pretty apropos. And so, yes, I think
it is. It's the invisible foot, or like an invisible iron fist at the end of the day. So, yep, it is a very appropriate analog.
As you're writing your piece, I'm getting a sense that, and you mentioned smoking and drinking. So basically, we're looking at the government acting as a central planner, managing somehow, usually by taxation, anything that the human wants to consume. Smoking, drinking, now meat. We are blessed, and I'm going to misapply that phrase, with more than a few examples of how central planning flat out doesn't work. These results, they seem not to be oriented for any other reason than ideology of the politician, and I think that that's a danger to begin with. Do you foresee it possible that, like this senator in Tennessee who wants to ban individuals from drinking milk from their own cows, is this going to just turn into a complete overlord state of everything we consume?
Well, government does operate on slippery slope premises, unlike what a lot of your so-called political experts will tell you otherwise. Because at this point, whenever you have such a massive state, it just begs the question for whatever busybody politician comes into power. Like, why don't we regulate this? Why don't we regulate that? And we've already conceded so much ground, both culturally and politically, as far as what the state can do in our lives, that you will see a complete nanny state in food affairs very soon. The Green New Deal, it'll probably get shut down in this current Congress because Democrats don't have a favorable makeup of Congress or the presidency that would sign it. But they've already floated the trial balloon idea. That's how progressivism works. It builds off of gradualist interventions and also the pitching of certain really crazy ideas that ultimately become normalized in the general culture. Yeah, I do see the war on meat is continuing slowly. It hasn't really concretized in the United States, but I could definitely see in the European Union, which already has monstrous amounts of government intervention in the economy, start to gain traction there and make its way across the pond to the United States.
I think that the presentation of something as just absurd as the Green New Deal is, as you mentioned, part and parcel of how, well, progressives, but maybe I'll even say politicians in general work. And so we're going to offer this completely idiotic proposal. And then while we're all talking about the shiny thing, in some back room, they're actually making deals that don't go quite that far, but still they're moving their line further and further and further up. So how does Joe Citizen address this? What can anybody do about politicians who are just not listening to the people?
Well, I'm of the opinion that you have to take a multi-pronged approach, both in the cultural and political sense. I think we do need more investigative writers that are willing to expose these schemes and start putting forward the idea that we need a separation of food and state as far as like nutritional policy is concerned in the United States. The more writers, the more cultural figures you have and commentators, the better, because politics does flow downstream from culture. Now, on the political front, I think like we need more like food freedom single issue groups across the nation at the local, state, and yes, even federal level, if it comes to that get very active. I have considerable experience in the like Second Amendment lobbying realm as far as like local and state level lobbying is concerned. And it's a very effective way for those people that want to go the local route. Single issue lobbying is great for libertarians and other people to get involved. And I think that's the strategy of grassroots activism combined with cultural awareness is the way to go.
I think you're probably right, but it also seems to me, from a libertarian standpoint, a real conflict to be engaging in politics and politicians when, if we take the Spooner side of things, there shouldn't be any of them to begin with. So it's almost it's a tough thing to sort of square oneself with if we're going to have, but if we're going to have the government and they're not going away tomorrow, then some expression of concern is, of course, the right thing to do. I'm maybe cynical enough to think that if they're not going to get money for it, they're not going to care about it. Maybe that's not really true of all of them, but do you see some hope for, at least at, say, a state level, for people addressing their legislators and saying, hey, this is getting a bit out of hand? Is there hope there?
I think you do raise some valid points, Dan. A lot of conventional politics, from my experience, tends to be quite overrated as far as impacting political change is concerned. And like, especially like voting, especially if you vote in the two-party system, like at the federal level, you won't see much change, to be honest. But I think for like, if you're going to get involved in politics, in practice and in theory, certain state legislatures and municipalities can be receptive to certain forms of activism if it's done correctly. But as I mentioned before, this is like a cultural thing. Like these kind of political acts are essentially downstream from the culture. And I think that for libertarians that are concerned about whether their political efforts will yield anything, I think they should very likely build more of, like, say, podcasts like this, or news outlets, or engage in investigative reporting that raises awareness of that stuff, and then segue it into, like, say, a political org at the grassroots level that raises awareness on this issue and that can change policy. I don't really see a lot of stuff at the federal level yielding much results in the short term, or even medium term for that matter. We have a really monstrously sized government in DC that is becoming more and more detached from the rest of the population. And you also just have a political culture in DC that really just doesn't care. And trying to build consensus in a nation of more than 300 million people on the ideas of liberty seems kind of like a stretch at this point. So I think a more decentralized approach as well in politics that combines like grassroots lobbying or whatever, or what have you, might be the way to go. The way you can fight back, though, is through investigative journalism, exposing this stuff on social media, creating videos, and doing that kind of stuff. There's many ways to skin this cat. It's not just politics.
Well, those are good points, and maybe we should, somebody with a podcast should do something about that. Since I am a food show, I'm going to lighten this up a little bit, and I'm going to ask you some food questions. And this is something I've sort of taken a couple of ideas and made them my own. If you ever watched the show Inside the Actors Studio, at the end, you'll have a rough idea of what you're getting yourself into. So, first question is, of the 5 flavors, sweet, salty, bitter, sour, or umami, which one is your favorite?
I would say salty. That's what I'm most used to, like because like when I was young, like growing up, like my family would always use like copious amounts of salt for like everything. So I'm pretty used to that.
What's your favorite food?
I would say like steak, specifically like fatty ribeyes.
Oh, you're going to make the keto people very, very happy. What's your least favorite food?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would say like lettuce.
What gets you excited?
Just like waking up every day because it's always filled with like new adventures, whether it's me trying to like expose like the latest like big government scheme or just going to like the gym just to get stronger and stuff like that. I see my life kind of as like a role playing game where I'm like leveling up. So yeah.
That's a great answer. I like that answer. What turns you off?
Conformity. And that kind of segues into like my lifestyle that I just like to keep moving. And anytime I become complacent or conform to something, I feel like I'm stagnating. And I like to encourage other people to kind of always push the envelope, both physically, intellectually.
What sound do you love?
I'd say like birds chirping in the morning.
Oh, that's nice. I agree. It's a great way to wake up. What sound do you hate?
I'd say any type of like smartphone notification. That's actually become quite a pet peeve now, like especially at in like coffee shops whenever like people's like phones go off simultaneously. It's pretty unnerving for me. Starting to realize that.
Yeah, well, in a crowded place, it can be monotonous. Yeah, that's true. What is your favorite food indulgence?
I would say anything involving like cheese or like butter, and if it's like doused in like fat, like added fat, like coconut oil or whatever, that's kind of like my thing. Because yeah, I guess as you said, like the whole keto thing. So like any type of fat bomb, to be honest.
Oh, nice. Yeah, fat bombs are yum. All right. Well, it's I appreciate your time today. This was a quick, short article, but it was a good one, and I will link to it at culinarylibertarian.com/26. Well, Jose, I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure chatting with you, Dan.
All right, folks, that's going to do it. You can find Jose's social media information, his Mises.org bio, and his newsletter link at the show notes page, culinarylibertarian.com/26. You heard Jose mention he does a lot of writing on the Second Amendment. He also has an ebook, 10 Myths of Gun Control, which you can pick up, and the link for that will also be on today's show notes page. The last bit of news is my ebook is done. Woohoo! It is a Muffins e-cookbook, and you can pick it up also at the link on the show notes page. Just give me an email address, and then you can download the book and start baking muffins for breakfast. And for that, I'll send you an email once or twice a week, not too many. All right, that's it. I will see you next week. All right. Well, have a great afternoon in Colorado. Is it snowing there?
It snowed a bit yesterday, but this winter the snow's been pretty tame.
Well, we had more snow here than we are used to in my experience in Oregon, but they say it snows a lot. But I'm from northern Michigan, so I'm familiar with a lot of snow.
Yeah, at least in Fort Collins, because I have some family like in Michigan and Ohio as well. The winters here are actually like really moderate, and like snow like melts within like a day, so it's not like it sticks for that long or really piles up. It's like on a rare occasion that you'll see like a blizzard. I've only been here for 2.5 years, and I'm very likely going to be moving back to Texas now that I'm location independent. So